Hey everybody. Most advice about breaking into tech assumes the problem is you. You need more skills, more projects, more certs, more something. And sometimes that's true. But for a lot of people, the real issue is simpler and a lot more frustrating. They're doing the work, they're ready, but employers just can't see it. And once you realize that that's the actual problem, visibility, the whole approach to job hunting becomes a lot different. Now, this is what career branding is for. You'll hear that phrase a lot in many different fluffy variations, so I'll kind of keep my explanation of it simple. Basically, a career brand is just how easy you are to read. When someone looks at your resume, your LinkedIn, your projects, and eventually you in a room, do all of those things say the same thing about you? That's the whole question. You want an employer to figure out what you do without much effort and feel like they can trust you. Getting to that point, though, is harder than it used to be, and to understand why, you have to look at what it's changed on the hiring side. Now, today's hiring market just hits different, and there is real data behind that. According to NACE, about 70% of employers are now using skill based hiring. And what that really means is that they've mostly stopped hiring for potential and started hiring for fit. It happened because bad hires simply got too expensive. Companies basically, spent years taking chances on people who looked promising and needed a couple of months to get up to speed. But in this like tighter market that we have going on, that kind of cost is just not something they're willing to eat anymore. So instead of going after someone who might grow into the role, they're willing to kind of focus in on more people who are better fits from day one. That same shift is why job listings read so much differently than they used to. They've gotten more practical instead of hopeful. The tools are named, the certs are listed, the platforms are all spelled out, and nothing on a modern listing is there by accident anymore. Every line is basically something that the employer is actively ticking a box for, and by the time your application reaches a human, that person is really only trying to answer the four things up here. Can you do the work? Can you explain the work? Can you work with other people? And do you present yourself well? Everything they read through gets filtered through those four questions, which is why the old advice about being curious and teachable simply doesn't carry the same weight anymore. Those qualities are just expected now. They're not just rewarded for being present. So, to get into what actually moves the needle and how you can kind of cultivate your brand to show you clearly, the first place we got to look is the first place every employer checks: your resume. All right. Now, resumes feel like a formality, but they carry a lot more weight than people give them credit for. A recruiter spends about 6 seconds on yours, okay, which means the whole document has to say something useful about your fit within that window. Its real job is not to tell your life story. It's just to make a clear claim about where you belong with the most relevant evidence to back it up. Now, before any of the humans read that claim, though, it usually has to get past some software first. That software is called ATS, which stands for Applicant Tracking System. Most mid sized and enterprise employers use it to manage the volume of applicants that they get. The ATS is not out to get you, it's just a reader. It pulls the structure out of your resume and it checks it against what the employer is looking for. The reason so many qualified people never hear back is usually because their resume was built to look nice instead of being easy for the software to read. Now, fancy templates and graphics can confuse the parser, and when that happens, the document basically never reaches a person and you end up auto rejected. ATS friendliness is not a trick, okay? It just means clean headings, a simple one column layout, and wording that matches how the employer describes the role. Now, even once your resume makes it through, the claim still needs backup, okay? Saying you can do the work and showing you can do the work hit very differently, and employers learned to want the second one. That is where a portfolio comes in. A portfolio is the evidence that makes your resume believable, and it can look like a lot of different things depending on the role. I'm going to cover portfolios probably in another video, so I will not get into the weeds on it here. For now, the thing to hold on to is that your resume makes the claim and your portfolio is what makes the claim believable. Neither one works nearly as well alone, okay? And here's that ATS friendly resume template linked below if you need a place to start. Once those two pieces are in place, the next question basically is what happens outside the application itself, because most employers never really stop at where you submitted. All right. They usually continue to look you up, all right? The second your resume gets someone's attention, they are typing your name into LinkedIn before you even set up a call. This happens way more than candidates realize, and it is the reason a weak or messy LinkedIn can quietly kill opportunities you never even hear about. LinkedIn is the public version of the same story your resume is telling, basically. And when those two don't match, basically the whole thing starts to fall apart. Your application put a lot of work into building a clear story about fit, and a LinkedIn profile that contradicts that story gives the employee a reason to pause. Now, making LinkedIn work for you is less about posting a lot and more to do with about making sure every fixed part of your profile is pointing in the same direction. Your headline is usually the first thing a recruiter sees, so it should reflect where you're going, not whatever job you're trying to leave. Your about section is where you say in plain language what you do and what you're looking for next. Your feature section is where the portfolio, work from the last section actually pays off, because you can actually put your evidence in there where the recruiters are going to look and see it. You can also have a custom URL, which makes stuff easier to find and share. You can have a work open to work setting, and if you use it right, it can put you in front of recruiters who are actively searching for stuff. So none of this social media stuff is just a plain setup. It's how you keep the story you built in your application from falling apart the moment someone goes looking for you in the real world. Now, if you are still in school, there is another thing worth using that a lot of students in college skip, and that is career services. All right. I get why people pass on it. It sounds boring. It sounds like a last resort, but at most colleges, career services is actually a hiring pipeline you are already paying for through your tuition. All right. It usually includes one on one advising, mock interviews with real feedback, employer events, job fairs, and a curated job board like stuff from Handshake. The employers who recruit through career services are there because they want to hire students and recent grads, which means the pool you are competing in is way smaller than it is on the open internet. Now, most students never walk through that door, which is why the ones who do tend to get a lot better results and faster results. Now, two handouts are below for this one, as you can see, a LinkedIn setup guide and a quick rundown of what your campus career offices can actually do for you, like a summary of what I know mine did, and maybe you can compare it to with what yours might have online. Now, once your materials and your public profile are both pulling their weight, the test shifts to something paper cannot really prepare you for. Let me fix my headphones here. All right, let's see, a human looking at you. All right, an interview. Now, the interview is where you have built everything so far and how that's going to get tested live. Up to this point, you have been judged through documents and profiles, which you can edit as many times as you want. The interview takes that safety net away, okay? You are being read in real time by a person in a conversation you cannot rehearse into perfection. And the real question that they are trying to answer is whether the person in front of them matches the person on the paper. That is what the interview is actually for. It is less a test of what you know and more of a test of whether the story your application told about you holds up. Now, most interviews are built around three kinds of questions, and each one is checking a different thing. Behavioral questions tend to ask what you've already done in real situations. Situational questions tend to ask you what you would do if you were thinking through something or having a problem that you might have not faced before. Technical questions usually are a skills check that are like on your resume. So, kind of if you know that you're supposed to service an application, do a quick refresher before you get asked questions on that because you will look silly if you say you know something and then they ask you a question about it and you're like, actually, I don't know that off the top of my head. All right. So, if you only prep for one of them, you are going to get caught off guard by the other two. All right. Which is why some people who know their tech cold still lose offers. All right. Now, what really separates candidates, in my opinion, is how you prep for your specific role. And a lot of people skip this step. You know, a help desk interview and a cybersecurity interview look almost nothing alike. And even though those are both tech jobs, help desk conversations are mostly about how you troubleshoot and how you talk to non technical users under pressure because the job is about patience and clarity as much as it is about the tickets. And IAM conversations, now those are mostly about how you think through access and identity, like who should be able to do what and when, because the role sits between security and regular operations. And the cybersecurity conversations, those are mostly going to be about how you think about risk, how you handle incidents, and whether you can think like an attacker about the systems that you're protecting. Well, when you prep for tech interviews, in general, there's a common mistake um, that people tend to make, which is not researching the role that you applied for. Look at the tools, be very, very specific about what you say, and try to line up your phrasing with kind of what either they've said on their website or with what you know is for compliance standards. Now, appearance fits into this conversation, okay? Because it is part of how you get read live, all right? Even if people are not always comfortable with admitting that. And I'm telling you, it's not about vanity and it is not about fitting a narrow minded idea of professional. Appearance is just a signal about whether you can read the room. Okay? It tells the person across from you that you understood the situation well enough to show up right for it, which is its own kind of communication. Okay? A simple rule is neutral, clean, and one step above whatever is normal for that role. Okay? You are not dressing for the job you have now, you are dressing for the bar that you are trying to clear, all right? You can see here a dress for success guide and an interview guide for help desk and all sorts of stuff is linked below. And when every one of those pieces lines up, what you pretty much end up with is this whole video put forward, all right? Now, everything here tells the same story. Your resume, your portfolio, your LinkedIn, your interview. I really need new headphones. Your appearance. These are not separate things to get right on their own. Okay, they're different sides of the same professional identity. And what makes a brand strong is how polished every single side of it is. It is whether they all point to the same version of you. Okay, and that is what employers are really picking up on when they say someone is a strong fit. They're picking up on the fact that they do not have to guess that you are prepared. Now, none of this means you need to know everything. It does not mean being the most experienced person in the room or the one with the most certs. It just means make it easy for employers to see that you can learn, you can communicate, and that you can contribute. Because those things, if they're shown consistently everywhere they look, will beat out a lot of candidates who are further ahead on paper but are harder to read when you're there. Now, make yourself easy to read. That's the whole thing. Everything I talked about in this video is on the screen now. The stats, the platforms, and every handout that I might have mentioned, they're all here. The links are all in this description in the comments below on TikTok. And if you don't know who I am, but you liked the video, I'm Minx Jinx. Please subscribe or follow me. I like making videos like this. I do home labs, I do some breach videos where I explain how things going on in enterprise services operate and how they respond to different stuff. So hopefully you'll see that portfolio deep dive that I mentioned coming out next, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.